Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're tearing into the masterful suspense and, honestly, the downright chilling narrative structure of the hit supernatural horror story, The Last Passenger. If you're a fan of dark, cinematic storytelling that really just messes with your deepest fears, you are absolutely in the right place. So let's just jump right in and map out exactly how the author constructs this terrifying journey.
I want you to put yourself in the protagonist Daniel's shoes for just a second. Imagine, the city train station is completely empty. There's a freezing cold storm raging outside, literally tapping against broken windows. You check your phone, absolutely zero signal. No taxis, no people, just dead silence. It's the perfect setup for a horror narrative, right? Because it instantly strips away all those cozy safety nets of the modern world. You just desperately want to get home, and man, that desperation, it makes you incredibly vulnerable.
So right out of the freezing fog, this unfamiliar bus just rolls up. The faded sign reads, Route 66, last night's service. Daniel makes what is basically a fateful choice to board this mysterious bus, and he's greeted by these super unnerving words, last ride tonight. And what's immediately striking here is the driver delivering that line. The guy has gray skin, completely hollow eyes, and he never blinks, not once. The author is already throwing up massive red flags for us, signaling that Daniel is stepping right out of the natural world and into something profoundly wrong.
Now notice how quickly the story builds this eerie, just completely suffocating atmosphere through the other passengers already on board. We've got an old woman, a businessman, a little girl, and this tall figure just hidden in the shadows at the back. But, it's not who they are that's terrifying, it's what they're doing, which is literally nothing. They just sit there in absolute, emotionless silence. None of them even glance at Daniel. They don't react to the storm raging outside. That kind of unnatural stillness, it creates this intense psychological tension that screams to the audience that something terrible is just waiting beneath the surface.
And this brilliantly illustrates what we call the threshold crossing in horror. The familiar world, it has completely vanished. When Daniel looks out the window, there are no buildings, no streetlights, it's just endless darkness and dead trees. Plus, the bus makes absolutely no engine sound, zero vibration. Daniel realizes, way too late, that he is totally isolated. The physical setting has completely morphed to reflect his entrapment.
From here, the author stacks the tension so meticulously, it really is a masterclass in pacing. First, the little girl's eyes suddenly turn pitch black, and she just flat out tells him he shouldn't have entered. Then the old woman physically grabs him, and her fingers are ice cold, totally shattering that eerie stillness we just talked about. And finally, the horror moves from inside the bus to outside. Heavy, dragging footsteps and metal-scraping claws start echoing right above their heads. The threat is escalating fast, from creepy, weird behavior to an active, supernatural danger.
Then, the old woman drops this incredibly chilling piece of advice that confirms all our worst fears. She says, "Don't talk to them after midnight. They don't like the living." I mean, wow. That quote perfectly frames the terrifying, claustrophobic nightmare Daniel is trapped inside. It lays down the rules of this supernatural space. Daniel isn't just taking a weird late-night bus ride. He is actively crossed into a domain where simply being alive is a liability, and unseen entities are on the hunt.
Which brings us to a really brilliant use of dramatic irony. While Daniel's still sitting there trying to rationalize the whole situation, asking the driver where they're going, we, the audience, are shown the absolute nightmare happening outside. There's a tall, impossibly thin creature with backward-bending arms and this giant, unnaturally wide smile running right alongside the bus, just staring directly at him. It completely signals to us that this is no ordinary transit system. We know for a fact he's in mortal peril, even as Daniel is still desperately clinging to the hope of a rational escape.
The dread absolutely peaks when the bus just stops, middle of nowhere, totally surrounded by fog, to pick up a new passenger. And the driver simply announces, "Next passenger." Out of the pitch-black darkness walks a man whose face is half crushed and his clothes are just absolutely soaked in blood. The author brilliantly engages our other senses here too, introducing this overwhelming smell of rotting flesh. It grounds all that supernatural horror into a gritty, visceral reality that honestly just makes your stomach turn.
The major turning point of the whole explainer arrives right here. Daniel is begging for the bus to stop, completely panicking, but the other passengers, they do nothing. Instead, the windows suddenly fog over and these blunt, horrifying words slowly trace themselves onto the glass. "You are already dead." It forces Daniel to stop running from the truth. This is the exact moment the narrative pivots from a simple, creepy ghost story into a full-blown existential nightmare.
So the really crucial point here is how the author masterfully connects Daniel's fragmented memories to execute a completely devastating plot twist. The pieces of the timeline finally fall into place. The rain, the slick road, crossing the highway while totally distracted by his phone, the bright headlights, and then the crash. Daniel was actually hit by a truck before he ever even reached the train station that night. That entire opening sequence of him waiting in the freezing cold, it was nothing but an illusion created by his dying mind.
With the ultimate truth exposed, the narrative shifts from this slow-burn atmospheric suspense into outright visual terror. The original passengers finally drop their little disguises. They reveal their fatal wounds in their true monstrous forms to Daniel. The businessman lifts his head, and his throat is slashed. The little girl's neck just violently snaps entirely backward. And that hidden tall figure in the back? It stands up, its body bending unnaturally against the ceiling, revealing a face with no eyes, no nose, just a giant gaping, smiling mouth. It is pure, unadulterated body horror.
The driver then finally spells out the terrifying rules of Route 66, stating, "This bus carries souls between worlds." And suddenly, everything we've seen so far makes perfect sense. The bus is quite literally purgatory in motion. Remember how the old woman mentioned earlier that the bus only appears for people close to death? Yeah, this is the transit system for those hovering right on the edge, that tiny, terrifying space between the final heartbeat and whatever comes next.
So now, Daniel is cornered by the faceless creature, whose mouth, by the way, is now splitting open to reveal dozens of clawing human hands inside. Just horrifying. And he's given an ultimatum. Choice A, stay with the dead and accept his fate on the bus. Or, choice B, take a massive leap of faith out into the warm, glowing, peaceful light passing by outside. The dead passengers start chanting in whispers, "Stay, stay." The windows begin to crack. Black liquid is pouring down. In this desperate, completely adrenaline-fueled panic, Daniel makes his choice and just dives headfirst through the emergency exit.
The story then brilliantly messes with our psychological relief. Daniel wakes up screaming, but he's in a hospital bed. Machines are beeping, doctors are rushing in, morning sunlight is pouring through the window. It's safe, it's warm. The nurse tells him the truck driver actually thought he was dead, but somehow he survived. He was all just a bad dream, right? But then, the author violently rips that safety net right back away from us. The nightmare reality invades the waking world. Daniel looks over at his bedside table and finds physical evidence from his journey. A small, black bus ticket, still wet with rainwater.
And written right there on that rainwater-soaked ticket are 4 final absolute gut-punch words. See you tomorrow night. These words fundamentally twist the entire narrative. What we thought was this triumphant story about survival and cheating death, it's instantly transformed into a promise of inescapable doom. The bus isn't done with him. He didn't actually escape. He merely delayed his trip to the final stop.
As the hospital lights start to flicker and the unmistakable grinding screech of heavy bus brakes echoes directly from the dark hallway outside his room, we're left with a chilling final thought. If the bus comes back, is there any escaping the final stop? It leaves us lingering on this incredibly unsettling idea that death is a schedule that absolutely cannot be outrun. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it gave you a deeper appreciation for the mechanics of a truly great horror story.